So audiobooks can also improve fluency. For students who struggle to read, they often are reading in a really choppy way and they're not making meaning from the text that they're reading. So by listening to an audiobook, they're going to be able to hear someone reading in a smooth, expressive way, and then that's also going to carry over into their own reading. Finally, audiobooks help kids to grow vocabulary. They're hearing vocabulary words pronounced correctly in context, and it's that vocabulary learning will also transfer into their independent speaking and reading vocabulary over time. So during the focus group, a question that came up, and throughout my conversations with teachers, a big question was around what are the drawbacks of audiobooks? And so it kind of depends on what we consider to be reading. If we consider reading to only be a matter of decoding, then audiobooks remove that demand from students. However, since we as a school have a much broader definition of reading, audiobooks are not taking away anything from students' ability to make meaning. They still require students to follow the plot, to analyze the setting, to evaluate characters, to consider the author's message. Also, if a student has a visual text that they can read while listening to the audiobook, they are continuing to build that decoding work as they hear a fluent reader and match that audio to the text that they're seeing. And then we can choose. Audiobooks can be a temporary scaffold that we allow a student to use for a short period of time while they're growing in their fluency as readers, or we may say this is a student who's always going to need that support and is always going to need audiobook supports. When we do use audiobooks in our classroom, there's a few best practices that we want to keep in mind. It's really important that we are giving kids texts to use while they have the audiobook in hand. We want to make sure that whether we're using a computer program that they can read along or whether they have a book in hand, they can connect the visual text to the audio that they're hearing. In addition, we want to continue to teach into reading skills like comprehension, setting, evaluating characters, evaluating relationships through our mini lessons in our small groups. And then finally, we don't want to neglect to teach kids decoding and fluency, which if we do want to move them off of audiobooks, they'll need at some point. If you're doing some research to try to find an audiobook program, we want to look for 4 things. We want to find an audiobook that is human narrated, human voiced, so that it's easier to understand. We also want to look for a broad selection of texts. Just like our classroom libraries, we have a large variety of texts so that students can choose texts that are meaningful to them. We want to do the same thing in our audiobook library. We also want to make sure that there's text provided with the audio, preferably highlighted, and that students have the opportunity to choose their own texts. Just as we wouldn't assign kids texts to read in our class, we don't want to have to assign kids audiobooks. We want them to be able to choose their own. So I'm just going to talk through a few of the audiobook resources that are available. One resource which often we forget about is the New York Public Library, which is a free resource for kids. On the New York Public Library, there's 3,500 books. They are free. They are human voiced. It's accessible on iPads and tablets, and kids can search for their own books on New York Public Library. However, there's no visual provided, so kids need to have a copy of the text. You would want to make sure you had that text in your classroom library and then give students the opportunity to search for it. Also, some of the audiobooks are checked out and can't be accessed, so we just have to deal with occasional unavailability. Another resource is Bookshare. Bookshare is a free resource. There's a large library of books. There's not as many student books, but there's actually, I believe, 500,000 books on the site.